What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Big Six Podcast, CBS Sports Daily NFL Podcast. I'm Will Brinson. I'm your host. It is Thursday, September 3rd, and gambling week rolls right along. That's right, gambling week. We've covered win totals with RJ White. We covered division odds with Larry Hartstein. Kelly Stewart was on yesterday talking about Super Bowl odds, and now joining us to talk about awards picks and props. I guess they're props, not really props, but like MVP, Offensive Rookie of the Year. Drew Dinsick, a.k.a. Whale Capper, now under your real name on Twitter. Or is it still at Whale_Capper on Twitter?
It's still at Whale_Capper. It's tough to change that, but you can see my real face and my real name now. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, people probably just type in Whale to see what what's going on my page. So can't disconnect.
If you are into NFL gambling, and if you listen to this podcast, presumably you at least dabble your toe in that arena, check out the Deep Dive podcast with Andy and the Whale. Of course, Andy was going to join us, actually, but he is pitching a tent, no euphemism, in Yellowstone Park right now on a vacation. You guys, they're great at handicapping football games. I've heard from multiple people independently who are like, I tail their stuff all the time. You guys do a great job. The podcast is very informative. I listen to it every week. And you do halftime periscopes, which usually involve Andy by a campfire drunk.
Yes, that's exactly the look we're going for. Exactly.
Right, which is a good look. Okay, so we're going to use and I want to point out, Drew, you noted as we were about to start that props and awards may be a way to focus your attention in 2020 because of the unknowns surrounding win totals and all that.
Oh, absolutely. Right? Absolutely. I think in a normal year, like around May, I kind of start putting together my numbers, really looking hard at the win total market, because once the draft is over, there are very few moving pieces. You really kind of know what you've got to go into war into, for the season. Obviously there usually are some preseason injuries. There's some weird camp news that might change your opinion on stuff. But this year in May and June, it was not clear at all that we were going to get a full 16 game season. So I kind of pivoted a lot of my focus on, okay, well, they're still going to give out an MVP, even if they only play like 10 or 12 games. Like, they're still going to give out the awards. So let's look at these markets a little bit more closely, see if we can identify some value. And, so I kind of spent a little bit of time crafting a little, okay, this is a thesis. Like, if you can only win the MVP if X, Y, and Z happen, like, who qualifies for that? Like,
yeah.
And if you shop around and find some prices, you can absolutely put together a nice little portfolio of picks that have plus EV. So that was kind of my entire summer, really prepping for the NFL, more than in a normal year where I would lean heavy into win totals and try to get down as much as I could before those numbers start to move.
Yeah, and look, I mean, the reality is we didn't know we were going to have an NFL season. I mean, I guess I wrote the win totals piece in May. I don't remember if I'm sure I did, but nothing is real in pandemic world, and nothing ever happened. And, if you do win totals, if you bet on win totals, even if you do them on a credit book, you are still tying up, like on a credit book, you can put down, risk 350 to win 300 or whatever it is, or risk 150 to win 100. You're still tying up part of your credit on that book. If you put down an actual win total in Vegas, you have to put down the full amount that you want to bet in cash with the book or on your account if you have an online account, and they're going to hold it until the end of the season. And I don't know if you know this, Drew, and I know this, and everybody who's betting should know this. If there's 10 games played this year, they're not going to refund you when the first game skipped.
No.
They're going to refund you in February or after week 17, like they always do. Yeah. I have a bunch of people that listen to this podcast, I hope, and a bunch of friends of mine bet on Tom Brady. Which roster will he be on come week 1 of the 2020 NFL season? And they bet the Buccaneers because the line didn't move fast enough to account for the information. Well, do you think that the books paid it out after free agency, or do you think they're going to pay it out in week 1? Because, what they would love is for – not like they want Tom Brady to be involved in some like Jeffrey Epstein ring and like he has to retire or he's like cut by the Bucks. But I mean, they're going to wait as long as possible. So it would suck to take, let's say you want to put $300 in the Lions over. You go and put down, I guess, so you would have to lay what? That's a bad example. Let's pick a team. The Raiders over is plus 100. You want to put $300 in the Raiders over. You got to put down $300 and you're not going to see that $300 and no matter what until late in the game. It's a nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of this going on in the gambling space. Where the players are getting free rolled. right? Like they can sit there and they're like, okay, well, there's a lot of rules about a lot of these wagers. Baseball has been pretty stark in terms of how the books have been handling this, where it's not clear like what exactly the rule is, and they may not decide one way or the other until they know which outcome better suits them.
Right. Exactly.
And so you're right. Like they offer.
By the way, if I look away from the camera, it's not because I'm not listening. I'm sweating out a Kim Pagula last parlay on a
she's the Bills owner's daughter.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah,
She rolled in her first set. Now she's struggling.
She was great last week too.
Yeah, she's struggling against a Belgian girl named Flipkins. The tennis sweat is real. I like the tennis sweat.
It is. It's a roller coaster. It's the back and forth in a given match is just wild, especially women's tennis. The peaks and valleys are really something.
Well, and I think too, one of the things at tennis, you watch it and you realize, man, you can, if you are smart and know what you're doing, and I don't always do that. Like I'm bad about live betting sometimes. You can definitely get some plus numbers on both sides in tennis, right? It feels like more so than even football. And I wonder, is that something you ever try to do when you're watching football to try and connect? Because if for people who are listening, if they don't get it, like if you bet on a team that is losing, you're going to get them at plus money more than likely, unless it's the Chiefs. And then if you get a plus money on one side and a plus money on the other side, if you bet $100 on each one, you get plus 150 on each one, you're making $50.
Risk-free.
And that is a risk-free $50. So that's the ideal world with live betting. How much of that are you incorporating in your strategy for 2020?
Another solid question, because again, like in breaking down the teams, I would normally be all about like looking at their schedule, trying to find value in the win totals, right? But this year I spent a lot more time thinking about like, okay, what's the blueprint of this team? What's their identity? Do they have the makeup of a team that can come back or a team that can put away wins, right? Because like a lot of people will look at running game or wide receivers or or defense and think of it in the context of fantasy football, but realistically, like if you have a strong running game, that's important for you to put away a lead, right? Sure. If you're good at stopping the run, that gives your team an opportunity to come back in games, right? So a team like the Bucs is probably a good example. Like they have one of these best run stopping units in the league. They have Tom Brady at quarterback. They have outstanding weapons in the passing game. That is a team that down multiple touchdowns, I will fire on easily. Like absolutely no concern at all. They will fight their way back into games if they are down. Like, and then you can flip the script and say, there are some teams, actually even like the Bucs, like their pass defense is not great. Their pass rush is not great. And their running game is a little suspect behind the kind of, bottom half offensive line, which means if they're up 2 touchdowns, it's not going to be necessarily easy for them to put away games, right? So there are teams like that where I think over the course of the season, you'll have opportunities either at halftime or live in game to take shots either for Bucs to come back or for them to choke away a big lead.
Another example would be too, like let's say the Seahawks are at home against, I don't know, the Bengals, just to make a whatever example. And the Seahawks are favored by 5.5 points. Well, take the Bengals on the money line and hope that the Seahawks will try to run, and not let Russ cook, won't score early. And then if the Seahawks get down, maybe the Bengals are a bad example, but you get the point. Then the Bengals get up, grab the Seahawks on the live money line, and then just leave the game alone. Yeah, and you've gotten both sides with some kind of profit out of the game. Like you don't have to squeeze. I'm terrible at this. I think I have to hit a home run every time. You don't have to do it. If you're good bankroll management and if you're smart better, that you just need to hit singles, and then along will come, some kind of occasionally you and I are in a group chat, and I've been a little absent. I'm gonna get back in for football, but the 49ers Packers game on Monday Night Football in the middle of 2019, it was like, this is the slammer. Yeah. Like the 49ers are going to bloodbath the Packers. Everyone load on the 49ers early. And that's one where you're not going to get it live because they're up so early, so quick. But I think you sort of have to hit those singles more often than people do.
Niners, another perfect example of having a good betting strategy on them. Like if they're up at halftime, I'll keep firing away. I'm not taking a shot on the other team because guess what? The Niners can run the ball. They can play keep away, and their pass rush is going to make it extremely difficult for you to come back on that team, right? Like, those are kind of the recipes you need. Like if you're a defense that has a strong pass rush or very solid cover corners, then it's going to be tough for teams to come back on you if you have a a 2-score lead, and vice versa. If you're a team with a weak pass rush and a weak pass defense, then you're going to have a much tougher time putting away those leads. So I think if you have kind of a conceptual framework of like what a team's strengths and weaknesses are, what their DNA is really in terms of their path to victory, I think that you can use that to your advantage to hit singles, because anyone that's been sports betting for a long time knows it's not easy. And that's no more true than the NFL. Like if you're definitely not going to get rich doing this. But it's the most enjoyable part of the entire sports experience. So
you shouldn't be diving into you shouldn't be diving into betting on the NFL thinking like I'm going to retire from my day job. By the way, sorry for slapping the microphone. A bug has flown into my office and is assaulting me. It's terrifying during this podcast. And I'm assuming Debo will get a gif of that. But yeah, I mean, I think the other thing too is that, a lot of times these lines come out on Sunday night for the following week's games. You're not going to be able to bet them throughout the week because there's going to be a lot of uncertainty about who's playing,
Oh, sure.
And so maybe live betting even becomes more of a thing this year than it normally would. Cause I don't know that you'll feel comfortable putting a bet down until 11:30 when you see inactives, because what if it's like, hey, by the way, Matthew Stafford's inactive. Then the Packers -3.5 is an absolute slammer, and that line's going to move 7 points,
Yeah, you just have to be have your ear to the ground and get that Matthew Stafford's going to be out news before everyone else, so that you can get Bears +3 when it closes -6.
Right.
Which happened last year.
Yeah, and by the way, that is true. That is exactly what happened. Cam Newton and the Cardinals too. There was an opportunity to buy on both sides.
Absolutely right.
So that's a little strategy, but let's get to the MVP chatter. Everybody wants to know, Drew, who's this year's Lamar Jackson or the year prior Patrick Mahomes? And unfortunately, because everybody is trying to find that, Kyler Murray, who would be the guy that you might pick for that, is now 20-1 to win the MVP. Yeah. At 50-1, I love Kyler Murray. At 20-1, I don't know that I can back it, because he's in there with the favorites are Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson. Mahomes is 3.5 to 1. Lamar 6 to 1. These are via William Hill Sportsbook, our pals over there. Russell Wilson 8 to 1. Deshaun 14 to 1. Dak 15 to 1. Tom Brady 16 to 1. Drew Brees 18 to 1. Kyler 20 to 1. And Wentz 25 to 1, because no one would call him Carson, just like you would never call Doug Peterson Doug. Aaron Rodgers also 25 to 1. And then we get to Saquon Barkley at 30 to 1. Any of those, you didn't say this, but I think you meant it. When you look at the DNA for an MVP pick, even in this weird year, you're still going with a quarterback who can win a lot of games, right?
That is where it starts and ends. Yeah. Don't get too fancy. Don't think like, oh, well, this running back could, like in today's NFL, the amount of usage a running back would have to get to compile stats that would overwhelm the rest of the quarterbacks at the top of the market is just insane. So I'm completely out on wide receivers, running backs. I'm only looking at quarterbacks.
The only way I would like a wide receiver or running back is if you could tell me this is going to be a 10-game season.
And that's fair. Yeah, that's a great point, actually. Yeah, that's very true.
Because Christian McCaffrey was at least in the conversation 8 weeks in, but he wasn't going to win. Like Lamar or Dak were still going to get it. If you bet Saquon Barkley 30-1 to win the MVP, or you're about to go to it, stop, DM me, and I will take whatever amount of money you want for Saquon Barkley.
Just buy your wife a nice bouquet of flowers, take her out to dinner. Do not put that bet down on Saquon Barkley. That's one of my least favorite on the whole board. That's one of the most.
It is the least favorite. He's above Matt Ryan. He's above Matt Ryan. Crazy. That's all you need to be said.
It's crazy.
Is there anybody in that upper echelon of guys that you would target, either because you think it could happen? Obviously, Mahomes could win the MVP and Lamar, or because you think there's any inherent value there?
Yeah. So in a normal year, I'm usually staying away from the top of the market because of the risk of injury and just in general, they've been overbet. if you make the point about Kyler Murray, yeah, he reasonably should be priced 40 to 50 to 1, but he's been absolutely steamed to oblivion at this point. So there's no way you can put a bet on that now. Right. And too much has to go right for the Cardinals, really. Like they would have to take an enormous leap to go from 5-11 to 11-5. That's asking a lot for a team. But in a normal year, I'm staying away from the top, and this year, doubling down, staying away from the top, because not only do you have a higher risk of injury with no preseason, you have a higher risk that a quarterback misses 2 important games because he gets COVID, right? Yep. And you have it just in general a lot more uncertainty in terms of how many games are going to be played, which, brings into this, small sample size. Somebody could go nuclear for 8 weeks and that could be your guy, right? So there are a lot of reasons to stay away from the top of the MVP market this year. And I honestly, I don't love any of these numbers, especially, for guys, a guy like Pat Mahomes, for instance. Like, he won it 2 years ago. He compiled some absolutely ridiculous stats. Not only would they have to get 13 wins in the number 1 seed, likely, but he would have to kind of match previous year's performance in a year where, the Chiefs have kind of learned, hey, we don't necessarily need to go wire to wire being the best team. We can just flip the switch in December, right? Like, That's kind of my read on that team overall. Like, well, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they just kind of play a little bit below their ceiling until, the games really matter. So
even down the stretch, Mahomes was playing better football than he had in his entire career.
Great point.
He wasn't putting up huge numbers because the defense was playing better, and he sort of they were getting leads and just squatting on him. The other thing too, I would say, and I think you're spot on, the phrase I like to use for it is voter fatigue.
Great point.
People do not like to vote for MVPs back-to-back years. They will try and find somebody else to win. That's why Peyton Manning lost to Adrian Peterson in the MVP race, because they were just like, nah, can't do it. Lamar Jackson, therefore, at 6-1, he has to replicate last year. Anything short of last year, and he will not win. And the other thing too, when you think about voter fatigue, Bill Belichick and Mike Krzyzewski haven't won a Coach of the Year award since like 2014. That's insane and stupid, but it's because people are like, well, they met expectations. Yeah. Like, if Patrick Mahomes wins 12 games and throws for 4,500 yards, no one's going to be like, was he transcended? There'll be somebody else who transcends the average that they'll vote for, whether it's like a Dak Prescott or whoever. So, I agree with you completely.
Yeah, and the voters, realistically, they're going to pick the quarterback for a team that either A, broadly exceeds expectations, or B, gets the 1 or 2 seed. Right? Like, they have to be at the top of the standings. People always look to reward, the top of the standings. And so you really can kind of narrow this down to, there's really only about 12 teams in the league that I think can realistically get a 1-2 seed in the AFC NFC. And we can start crossing guys off just based on price, like Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. And I think you can whittle your way down pretty quickly here to some bettable numbers. I'm looking at first one that catches my eyes is Jimmy G at 33-1.
Yes.
The San Francisco 49ers, not only do they have an exceptionally soft schedule to start, but I think the narrative last year, the reason he wasn't in the conversation was because everybody assumed, hey, they're getting it done with defense, right? Like, this, they're not winning games because of Jimmy G's performance. They're winning games because the defense is awesome, right? Well, their schedule a little bit tougher for the defense to replicate their outstanding performance last year. We know defense is not necessarily predictable from year to year anyway. It's more of a reflection of the teams you play. And so I think if the Niners are going to repeat in terms of, dominating the NFC this year, it's going to have to be on the back of Jimmy G taking a step forward. You add into this third year under Kyle Shanahan, that was the exact recipe that Matt Ryan needed to get the MVP award when he was, led the Falcons to the Super Bowl for Atlanta. And, it's the weapons. I love Kittle. He is going to be absolutely unstoppable. He is a perfect safety blanket. I'm hopeful that Deebo Samuel is available for the full season, because the wide receiving core is a little thin outside of that. But if you're going to give me Kyle Shanahan, and if you're going to give me a team that is as complete as the 49ers, and a team that is likely to get, the one of the top 2 most likely to get to double-digit wins, and their quarterback is 33-1, I'm making that bet every time.
I like Garoppolo too. I think he's undervalued. I wish he was closer to 50-1, but I think there's probably some sense out there in the market that to your point, like this is a guy who could capture the 1 seed.
Yeah.
And he completed almost 70% of his passes for 4,000 passing yards, 27 touchdowns, and 13 interceptions, coming off a torn ACL.
Yes, exactly.
Like that's a pretty good season for a guy like that. He's 28, and the pass catchers is a problem. But I'll say this: if Debo comes back and Brandon Ayuk is able to get healthy, and like they have Kendrick Bourne, that's actually a narrative push. Like, hey, he threw for 4,500 yards with no true number 1 receiver, and the offense took off. And maybe they'll have to keep pace with Seattle and LA and Arizona, and you end up getting a bunch of shootouts.
Yeah, realistically, that's a great point. Yeah, no, their division has upgraded offensively across the board, so they're going to have to score points. That's a great point, and not to rub it in, but it did used to be 50-1.
Do you have 50-1?
We ground that number down real good.
Okay, that was an elbow grind.
I still think 33-1 is value. I would make this 25-1 if I was making fair prices here. So I think that's still worth firing on. But the situation is just very, very solid. Like realistically, Saints, Niners, clearly the top of the NFC, and Drew Brees is 18-1, Jimmy G is 33-1. And just top to bottom, younger arm, better.
Drew Brees
overall,
Jimmy Garoppolo had a better season than Drew Brees last year.
And on top of that, guess what? Jimmy G has room to grow. Right. Like in the same narrative space, like if he takes a step forward, like literally people are just going to be all over it. Like it is a it's paved with potential, and so that's probably my favorite look.
All right, I'm putting that one down as
nice.
Jimmy G.
Right. My co-host Andy made a very strong case for Ben Roethlisberger at 50-1.
Sure.
Which again, kind of in the same vein where the Steelers got it done with defense last year. If they had an average quarterback performance, they're clearly a playoff team. And the defense likely to take some sort of step back this year, even though they're basically the same unit. And Roethlisberger with the changes he's made in his life, and being a
loves Jesus.
Big Jesus fan. Oh yeah, he's got the big J behind him this year. And it's a team that is absolutely loaded with wide receiving talent, solid offensive line. It's tough for me not to like Roethlisberger at 50-1, but the Steelers have to somehow get ahead of the Ravens in that division, which is going to be super tough. So not my favorite, but Andy had a very compelling case for that.
The narrative train will be big on Big Ben for sure.
Oh yeah, and the comeback player of the year is between Ben and Cam Newton. Whoever wins more games between those guys is your comeback player of the year, and it's possible that they give comeback player of the year to Cam and MVP to Ben if Ben shows out. So that'll be interesting. And then the other one that catches my eye, and this is I don't have a ton of hot takes about this season. In general, like
are you about to drop a Detroit Lions are good on us?
No.
Okay.
I'm not a Matt Patricia guy. Count me out on Matt.
I'm betting on Matthew Stafford to win MVP.
Okay, I'd love to hear your case in a second. I like a guy that's at the same price in the AFC, and it is Ryan Tannehill at 66-1. Okay, so I don't have a ton of hot takes. I think the rich pretty much got richer across the board, right? The Titans have a sneaky loaded roster. They have very, very solid players at every important position. They have a solid offensive line. Tannehill has a young, diverse set of receiving weapons. And, people largely think that, Derrick Henry was responsible for their playoff run last year. And granted, he was awesome in a couple of those games, especially, kind of putting away the Patriots, putting away the Ravens. But if you break down the stats a little bit, more in depth, Ryan Tannehill's performance over the last 8 weeks of the season was flat out awesome. He was so good. And if he is even close to that level in terms of his completion percentage, in terms of his, his expected points added, this Titans team is going to be a lot better than people think. There's kind of an overwhelming push to kind of look for a long shot in the AFC, and people have all kind of clamored onto the Indianapolis Colts because now they've upgraded at quarterback because they brought in Phillip Rivers, and Frank Reich's obviously a great coach, and they have all this young talent. But like where they're strong, like a weak, like an off-ball linebacker, a guard, where they're like especially talented. I'm kind of like,
it's the opposite of like when you say the cornerstones of pass rusher.
Yeah, exactly. Like, okay, those guys are freaking awesome. They may be the best players at their position in the league, but like they still have some huge weaknesses on that team. Meanwhile, the Titans, I think, are pretty complete, pretty strong. And, Vrabel got those guys bought in. Like he got that locker room bought in big time last year with that run that they had, going on the road, beating the Texans week 17, beating the Patriots on the road week in the wild card round, beating the Ravens in the divisional round. That was a hell of a run. I think he's got buy-in from all these guys. And I think the Titans are going to be pretty good. And the thing, what actually kind of tipped the scales for me with the Titans, because a lot of people in the analytics community are like, look, X, Y, and Z are unrepeatable. Like they're going to take huge steps backwards, right? Like, it's inevitable, right? That they're going to regress. But like you look at their schedule, they have a week 1 game at Denver, which is obviously tough. You don't really ever want to go play at altitude early in the season. It's tough on your team. But from week 2 to week, I think 10 or 11, they only leave Tennessee twice. So they have this like 8-game stretch where they are going to be comfortable and at home. All of their 50-50 games, teams have to come to them. And I know I'm not making a ton out of home field advantage this season, but for sure, early in the season, as teams are kind of figuring out how to travel correctly, like when to leave, like how to work all of the kind of weirdness that is going to exist through the month of September and October. Like I definitely think it's advantage if you get to stay home and have everyone come to you early in the season. I think it sets up Tennessee pretty well to kind of come out of the gates and just fire wins. And that can build a little narrative for Ryan Tannehill.
So his per 16-game average last year as a starter, just including the games, because he started 10 games, I think.
Yeah.
He would have averaged, or his per 16-game numbers would have been 4,150 yards, 35 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 69.6% completion rate, and 9.6 yards per attempt, 10.4 adjusted yards per attempt, not to mention 290 rushing yards and 6 rushing touchdowns. I mean, that would win you the MVP if the Titans win 12 games. Yeah, so I guess it depends on if you're – and one of the other things that sort of flew under the radar, and I've seen a lot of fantasy analysts point this out, but like A.J. Brown – they'd be like, well, A.J. Brown's numbers are unsustainable. Yes, but his snaps and usage rate were not where they could have been. Like, if he plays a full season and is 75% of what he was, they have a monster on their hands.
Yeah. And I mean, realistically, just a bunch of young talent in the receiving core across the whole, the whole front starting set, starting unit. Jonnu Smith, decent. Absolutely.
And your point about closing out games too, like you got to have victories. You got to have a team that wins a division to get MVP. If Tannehill's really efficient early in games and they get leads, they're going to close teams out because they can rush the passer and run the ball. And it doesn't matter what happens in the second half of games. If his numbers are there and they're winning football games, he'll be in the discussion. So I'm with you.
Really, Tennessee, if they can compile 8-9 wins out of their first 11 games, the narrative is going to be there that, hey, because early in the season, weather's a lot better, passing is a lot easier. Tannehill should be able to show out, right? And you're right, they can put away wins with Derrick Henry late, and they have some very solid players in the secondary. One of the sneakily one of the better secondaries across the entire NFL. So it's going to be tough to come back on this team. And it's all you need is kind of through Thanksgiving. The Titans are at the top of the, oh my gosh, they might steal the 1 seed in the AFC. It's all because of Tannehill has been so awesome this year. Who knew he was this good? And then at that point, feed Derrick Henry all through December. Just boom, boom, boom. Put it away. Put away.
Tannehill's running play action shots down the field, and
no problem at all. So the recipe is there for Tannehill. And again, one of a few teams that I think can realistically steal the 1 seed in the AFC, and their quarterback is 66-1.
Yeah, I'm with you. Rivers at 50-1. I understand why nobody wants to be on it, but there's reasonable value. And then Matthew Stafford, who I like. My argument there is I actually don't hate Baker Mayfield at 50-1 either, but I think with Stafford and Mayfield, a lot more has to go right for them to get that 1 seed or to get that high on the list. And it is a shortened offseason. Stafford was on pace for 5,000 yards and 40 passing touchdowns if you played a full season. So if the Lions win that division and win 10 games, even if they're like the 3 seed or the 4 seed, I can see a scenario, and Stafford plays 16 games and has those numbers, and he fits Darrell Bevell's system, right? They want to run and take deep vertical shots. Bevel got killed in Seattle because of the Marshawn Lynch, the interception against the Patriots in Super Bowl 49. But he's pretty much been a very good OC everywhere he's gone, and Stafford was thriving in his system. So I think a second year in that, Kenny Golladay breaks out. Marvin Jones is playing for a contract. I love Golladay. I think could be wide receiver 1 in fantasy. To me, the value at Stafford at 66-1 is absolutely worth taking a gamble on. But I think, I would rather put down, let's say you bet $100 on the MVP. Don't bet $100 on Mahomes at 3.5-1. Bet 25 on Stafford.
There you go.
Ben, Tannehill, and Jimmy G. And then if one of those hits, you've paid for your whole season.
Yeah, that's a great approach, and I support all that. I like the Stafford call too. There's so much momentum for the Lions being the sneaky team. That's got me a little, a little on guard. Like,
it all happened at once too. It was really weird.
But your point about Bevel and his system and the perfect fit with the weapons they have is spot on. Like, it is, he should have a 5,000-yard passing season.
Sure.
Realistically. And honestly, like, if Bevel does any self-reflection about the early half of last season, like, they weren't aggressive enough later in games. Like, they took their foot off the gas too much, like, at halftime. Like, week 1, like, how in the world do you let the Cardinals come back and and tie that game? It was like absolutely insane. And similarly, they couldn't quite put away games, and I think a lot of that was because, like, Patricia. I'm not my guy. Like Patricia's not my guy. In the same way Vrabel is my guy. Like, I'll go to war for Vrabel. Patricia's not my guy. But he just, like, was too conservative. Like, okay, well, we have a lead. Let's run the ball now. But you didn't have any kind of a semblance of a run game. Like, you didn't have
that play against Arizona in week 1, where they come out and they ran some kind of like naked boot. It's the guy who used to be in Seattle, the running back who catches the pass. I want to say Joey Bell. That's obviously not it. It was, I'm going to take a second. He's running wide open, and Stafford is about to throw it to him, and it's going to be a huge – J.D. McKissick. It's going to be a huge completion. Bug is assaulting me. Finally killed him, I think.
Got it.
And Patricia calls timeout, and Stafford is just like, what? Are you effing kidding me? Like, this game is over. I'm hitting him for a touchdown right there. And I do think that there's something to be said for dudes who are playing for their jobs.
Yeah.
And these guys are going to be playing for their jobs. So you could see them come out and maybe be a little more aggressive. We'll see.
Yeah, I hope so. They really have nothing to lose because the NFC North is entirely winnable.
Yeah, absolutely.
It really is. Like, every other team in your division took a step backwards. Like, it's now or never.
Yeah. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back and we'll talk Defensive Player of the Year and offensive. We'll talk defensive rookies and offensive rookies and all those other awards. Okay, so MVP odds in the book. Let's talk some Defensive Player of the Year and other awards. We'll start with Defensive Player of the Year. There's no Offensive Player of the Year odds out there. And you got to remember, when you're betting on these, that you have to also, as we point out with the narrative, this is not like, you're not betting on who leads the league in sacks.
Right.
This is not not an entirely statistically driven thing. As I point out all the time on this podcast, Pete Prisco has a vote for these awards. So good luck getting in the head and the mind of Pete Prisco. You don't want to be there. It's like you ever watch Rick and Morty, Drew?
Yes, I love that show.
Right, it's great. So the episode where they do the Inception? It's like one of the first few episodes.
Yes.
Like they go to this really dark. They keep going to these darker and darker dreams.
Yes.
Pete Prisco's head.
Scary Terry.
Scary Terry. Right. You don't want to be involved in Inception with old Scary Terry or Pete Prisco. So, but I do think the Defensive Player of the Year is a little easier to navigate.
Yeah, for sure.
Again, when we look at the criteria, you probably need to have a winning team. Or a team that is at least better. The overall defense has to be good, and the guy needs to produce statistically. Now, Stefan Gilmore is sort of a rare case because he just sort of, dominated and exploded on the scene, and he was on an epic Patriots defense. He didn't need to have 40 interceptions to win.
Right.
But by and large, you're looking. Don't you agree that you're looking like who leads the league in sacks?
Pretty much, yeah. And it's not. I agree. You were kind of like, it's soft that it has to be a good team. Like, you can't be on a 5-win team. Like, you can't be on a bad team. You can be on an 8-8 team. But it's an award that is kind of consensus, this is the best defensive player in the league. Like,
Yes.
you know, like this guy is the best, you know, and they kind of, you know, there's a torch passing, so to speak, you know, from guy to guy who they kind of anoint the best player in the league, JJ Watt to Aaron Donald to, you know, and I think you're right. Gilmore last year won not because of how many interceptions he had, but it was almost like a carryover, like people in the offseason kind of reflecting on the Patriots Super Bowl run were like, man, Gilmore was freaking awesome. You know, and that whole playoffs, he was so good. He locking down X, Y, and Z. Like he was a huge part of why the Patriots won the Super Bowl. And then they come into the next season, and over the first 8 weeks, the Patriots had, you know, like statistically one of the most impossibly good defensive performances you've ever seen. Now, in hindsight, they played some absolute, you know, dog's breath quarterbacks. Like that was a really, really easy schedule that they had.
It wasn't a historically great defense.
Easy.
It was a historically bad group of quarterbacks they played.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, right. It was they were good, but they were playing like, you know, the you know, the Sisters of the Poor or whatever. And so yeah, that kind of built the narrative for Gilmore. I didn't think wouldn't have been my pick last year, but that's fine. That's fine. And I really would have a tough time seeing it going to a defensive back this year for sure. I think almost certainly you're looking at a handful of pass rushers who can compile statistics, like you said. And there's some guys that are going to be absolute monsters. Overall, I would say that the league right now is relatively, it's relatively young, inexperienced, and poor at offensive tackle, right? And I think that there are a handful of absolute standout pass rushers that are worth giving some serious consideration to. So I think you'll see some pretty eye-popping sack numbers this year. There's a couple of units in particular who have just depth and waves of guys that are going to be able to get after the quarterback. And there's really only like 5 or 6 candidates as I look at this list, to be honest with you. All of the long shots I think are worth kind of.
All right, I agree. I don't like any of the favorites. Like, do not bet on Aaron Donald at 6-1.
Oh yeah, no.
A lot has to happen. The one guy up top that I do like is Myles Garrett at 20-1, and I think you can find him at 25-1 in some places. And this is a little bit narrative driven, but if he plays 16 games and doesn't get suspended for blasting Mason Rudolph's face with the helmet, and the Browns can make the playoffs, and he gets 15 sacks. That's a lot. You're asking a lot, but I think he's close to averaging a sack a game. Like if he has 15 to 16 sacks, I think he's got a very good chance of making it. Do you think Myles Garrett is too underpriced or is just about right?
No, I think that's just about right. I had him at this almost same price last year, and I was bummed that I was bummed that he got suspended when he did, because he wasn't going
to win anyway because they were so bad.
He was coming into his own though. I don't think they were going to steal a wild card spot. But based on what his contract is, like, it's not crazy that people around the league are looking around like, who's the best defensive player in the league right now? Well, you'll get some answers. Will be Myles Garrett. And just from the guys at the top here, I'm out on Aaron Donald with you. I do not think he has a realistic shot here. There have been way too many important pieces lost in terms of depth for the Rams defense. The Rams defense like defines stars and scrubs now. Yes. And if you want to stop Aaron Donald from disrupting your offense, put 3 hats on him. Like, you're going to be able to take him out of the game. JJ Watt, similarly, on a relative stars and scrubs unit. On top of the fact that if JJ Watt plays a full season, I would be impressed. He is a huge candidate for injury at his age, and how much usage he's had to this point in his career. I look at Khalil Mack in the same sort of way. Like, I know a lot of people have built up the Bears defense is going to be back. We added these pieces, but they lost a ton of depth as well. And realistically, 1 or 2 injuries to any players on their defense, and it becomes pretty straightforward taking Mack.
Akeem Hicks got hurt last year, and Khalil Mack disappeared.
That was it. One guy. That was one guy. So,
I think we talked about that on the deep dive pod, maybe.
We might have. Yeah. It was wild because who knew and that's kind of a huge element of a good defense. Like, you need depth. You can't just rely on 1 or 2 stars because your guys are going to get hurt over the course of the season. Like, even the Niners, who had a historically good defense last year, their performance over the first 8 weeks compared to the last 8 weeks was totally different, and a ton of that came down to just a couple of key small injuries that affected their depth. Nick Bosa, I'm also going to steer clear of at 9-1. Staying on kind of the Niners there, mostly just because for whatever reason, he just can't get home. Like, he's so disruptive and hurries and pressures. But going up against guys like Kyler Murray, going up against Russell Wilson 4 games a season, like, he just can't get those guys down. He's not quite fast enough. It's
Good point.
Very frustrating. So I'm going to steer clear of Nick Bosa. Plus, Niners defense. I will be surprised if the expectation across the media landscape is that the Niners defense is as good this year as it was last year. I think almost certainly it's going to take a step back. Steering clear of Joey Bosa as well. Thinking, that Chargers are going to get very, very little attention here. Not expecting much out of this unit really at all, even though they have a solid defense and they'll probably be a top.
Hey, Derwin James is out. I'm out.
I know. Same feeling. So then you're down into guys that I think are worth giving some serious consideration to. TJ Watt, number 1 at 16-1. Steelers, they returned everything. They have guys coming back off of injury, even who, guys like Stefan Tuitt last year was, missed most of the season, and they've added some depth. They have some young guys like Minka Fitzpatrick and Devin, the linebacker who they drafted early the previous season. Bush, no, is it White or Bush? Bush, right? Anyway, they have
Bush is Steelers. Yeah, Bush is
Steelers and White is Bucks, right? Yeah. Too easy to get those guys confused. Anyway, Bush is getting another year older. Bud Dupree is a fine complimentary player. You have some overall talent on that Steelers defense that it's going to give TJ Watt the opportunity to compile stats. Really, is what it comes down to. And like, if there's one thing that the media loves to glom onto, a brother of a guy who used to be the best defensive player of the year is now the best defensive player of the year. Like, it's tailor made for Sports Center segments and columns and everything. So TJ Watt absolutely has to be in the mix at 16-1. Myles Garrett, I agree with you, has to be in the mix at 20-1. And then other guys that I think can realistically compile massive statistics. I don't hate Yannick Ngakoue at 40-1. That's kind of a nice deep defensive line that they have now in Minnesota with Ngakoue and Hunter. I love Hunter. He's a super solid player, but his price is a little short of 25-1. There was a couple other guys I had circled here. Clyde Campbell at 40-1 isn't crazy. The Ravens are going to have an absolute. They've invested so much money on this defense, and they have a unique scheme where they blitz quite a lot, and he should be the beneficiary of a lot of the pressures and a lot of the sacks, given that he's still got a little bit left in the tank. So I think you kind of still want to spread it around in this category because it's tough to really project out who's going to compile the statistical categories. But TJ Watt and Myles Garrett absolutely have to be circled at the top of the list.
Yeah, I agree with you. I would throw Darius Leonard on there, and I know that we just preached that pass rushers are key, but Darius Leonard was banged up a little last year and had a down season. Like if you look at his stats, he had a monster rookie year out of nowhere because he's out of South Carolina State, second round pick by the Colts. Last year he had a down season, 13 games because he was hurt, 5 interceptions, 1 touchdown scored, 7 passes defense, 2 forced fumbles, 5 sacks, 121 tackles, 7 tackles for loss, and 6 quarterback hits. Like that's a really good season, and they did it in 13 games. And I just think if DeForest Buckner, because DeForest Buckner isn't going to win Defensive Player of the Year. I don't. Unless he just turns into an edge monster out of nowhere. Like, I think he's going to be more concentrated on beefing up the interior. He will get his sacks, of course. But I think Leonard is a guy where if Buckner plays 16 games and transforms that defense and they become a top 15 unit, Leonard is going to have the peripheral stats, and you're going to see him on highlights. And that matters when you talk about the narrative. And he's, 40-1 as well. So I like Leonard there. I wouldn't hate, hold on, I got to play this. I wouldn't hate this guy.
Tyrann Mathieu.
That is John Brees pronouncing Tyrann Mathieu. I wouldn't hate him, but I just think
66-1 is good.
It's not terrible, but I agree with you. Like, you want these pass rushers. Interesting name, if he can stay out of trouble. Ed Oliver at 100-1. He's got an Aaron Donald-like skill set, and if you look at his snaps, I think he's at like 50% snaps last year. If he can get up to 80 and he can get like 10 sacks from the interior, and the Bills win 12 games and win the AFC East, and they have the best defense in football, and Oliver makes this leap forward, and he's sort of the face of it. I can see that happening. I don't mind splashing a little bit on him at 100-1.
Yeah, the only other guy I kind of I like the Tyrann Mathieu call. I don't disagree with any of your takes there. Those are all very guys that are definitely in the mix. The Tyrann Mathieu is kind of same sort of vein as Stefan Gilmore, kind of getting a ton of credit after the fact.
Yes, I would agree
for the Chiefs defense run last year, right? So it's tough to say what you're going to get out of the Chiefs defense this year. You know,
you're sort of buying high on Mathieu.
Yeah, to a degree, but I mean, 66 to 1,
right?
It's not really, it's not buying that high, so right. It's not bad. And you know, I think there's enough guys on this list who I think have zero chance that I don't mind taking some additional swings here,
like Byron Jones. What is he? What are you doing?
Yeah. Great question. Richard Sherman had effectively a late career season last year. You know, and he's gonna, even if he repeats his season, which is hard for me to buy into, that he.
So David Clowney's 22 to 1, and he's not signed. Yeah, and that's not knocking William Hill or the odds, but like the reality is that when these guys, there's some value and there's some plus EV action here, because big names are going to get pushed up the board, and if you can identify somebody as the next breakout star or somebody who has a big.
Derwin James is still on here. He's not going to play this year.
Derwin James not playing this year.
He's not. He should not be 25 to 1. I'm going to go on record. That is a bad price.
Do not bet Derwin James. All right, let's stick with the rookies and go to defensive rookie of the year. The obvious favorite, Chase Young, 3 to 1. Isaiah Simmons, 8 to 1. Patrick Queen, 11 to 1. AJ Epinesa, 14 to 1. This is I'm not knocking these guys who are making the lines. It's hard to make defensive rookie of the year lines. But AJ Epinesa is going to come in and have enough sacks where he wins. Kenneth Murray, 20 to 1. Jeffrey Okudah, 20 to 1. Javon Kinlaw, 25. Derek Brown, 25. Caleb Von Chason, 25. CJ Henderson, 25. Ashton Davis, the safety, 28 to 1. And then you really start to drift off. Is there anybody who's a long shot that you could get behind, or anybody up at the top of the board that you think is value?
Yes. It is insane to me that Chase Young is not even odds. It is insane to me that Chase Young is not even odds. Okay. I do not understand why they are giving you such a fair price here. First of all, most of the defensive players who are going to get significant roles this year, kind of at the top of the draft, are cornerbacks. And if you've been following football long enough, you know how difficult it is to stand out as a young cornerback. There is just so much to learn about the position, and so you're exposed so often over the course of the season. It's just really, really, really hard to be a standout player as a rookie in the defensive backfield. So almost certainly I'm looking at linebackers who can compile tackles, or defensive players who can compile sacks. And Chase Young is really the only guy that I think fits either of those categories. And you're putting him on a team that is absolutely loaded with first-round talent in the front seven. The Washington football team, you look at those names and you look at where they're drafted, you look at their pedigree, you look at how they performed even last year. That is a super solid defense. Right now, everyone kind of kicking the Redskins around like they're, for sure the 31st or 32nd best team in the NFL. I would go out on a limb and say that they are going to surprise people in terms of wins, in terms of defensive play, just on the basis of you have so much talent on that defense, and you've now added, a generational pass rusher in Chase Young. If he, his downside is a potential injury, and I don't know what else prevents him from winning this award reasonably. I think fair price should be even odds on this one for this guy.
I agree with that. I have no problem taking, and we just said don't take the favorites and like MVP and all that stuff. But this is a different story.
This is a different story. And oh, by the way, like if the Redskins surprise and somehow wins
Washington football team.
If the Washington football team somehow surprises and wins 6-7 games, right? Let's say that Thanksgiving they're playing the Cowboys, and the Washington football team is what would they be like? 5-5, or
right,
the narrative is going to be, hey, can you believe it? They're in the mix. Like they could get that 7th wild card, spot. Like people are going to be, talking about what a surprise it is that they're in the mix, and it's all going to be because of defense. They're not going to be winning games because their offense is going to explode all of a sudden.
Right.
It's going to be based on the fact that you have this just unbelievable talent, waves and waves of players you can pass rush. And what does this sound like? This sounds exactly like what the Niners did last year. Exactly. Like you have
waves of pass rushers. Yeah.
Yeah. Just waves of guys, and first round picks all across your front 7, and you add the clear best defensive player in the draft. Like this is a slam dunk for Chase Young.
Okay, I have no problem with that. The other guys I would look at would be Kenneth Murray at 20-1. And now this was I like this a lot better when Derwin James was healthy, because if the Chargers defense was great and Kenneth Murray piled up tackles in the middle, 20-1. If he leads the league in tackles and Chase Young just sort of stumbles, then there's some value there. Man, I agree with you. This is a very cornerback and secondary heavy draft. And actually that even plays into Chase Young even more. Yeah. You cannot take a cornerback. Do not take a defensive tackle, and do not take a cornerback to win Defensive Player of the Year. The impact isn't going to be there. If I were looking for a longer shot, though, the one guy who's sort of interesting to me would be Kyle Duggar.
Ooh, yeah.
40-1.
Okay.
He's Bill Belichick's first overall pick in this entire draft. They lose Patrick Chung and Donta Hightower. Not that, Duggar's playing Hightower's spot, but they've lost guys due to opting out. We still think the defense will be good. Maybe Duggar can make an impact in year one. And, if guys are great under Bill Belichick, they're going to get credit. They're going to get more focus. So if I was picking a defensive back, I would look at maybe either him or Jeremy Chin. If Jeremy Chin could go monster for the Panthers as a safety. So I think those two guys could make sense. But by and large, I don't think – I know one more. Antoine Winfield for the Buccaneers.
Yeah.
You're dropping him in a really good defense that's strong up front, that has some decent secondary pieces. He's a ball hawk, so he can get you numbers. So at 50-1, I don't mind splashing that. But I think if we're building out a portfolio for this, allocate 50% of your defensive rookie of the year assets to Chase Young, and then just sprinkle a couple other guys, right?
Yeah, that's fair. And because like I said, I think fair price for him should be even odds, right? So 50% of your 50% of your DROI portfolio is Chase Young. That's fine. And the downside risk is literally that he somehow gets hurt. But I'm bought into the generational nature of Chase Young, and I bought into the Washington football team defense being surprisingly good.
I will Venmo request you for $1 for our Washington swear jar. Every time we say the R word, we're putting $1 into a swear jar apparently. So which means I'm going to be dead broke by the end of the season. I can't stop freaking saying it. All right, let's close up with the offensive rookie of the year. To no one's surprise, the big favorite here is Joe Burrow at plus 225. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was 6-1 until Damian Williams opted out. So if you're going to take Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I hope you did it before. He's now 3.5-1. Doesn't exactly entice me. Tua 8-1. We don't know if he's starting. Jonathan Taylor 12-1. Don't know if he's starting. Henry Ruggs at 14-1. He'll be starting. He and CeeDee Lamb also 14-1. Judy 16-1. DeAndre Swift 18-1. Cam Akers, Justin Herbert, J.K. Dobbins, and Justin Jefferson 20-1. Jalen Reagor 22-1. Keyshawn Vaughn 22-1, and T. Higgins 25-1 is the top of the list. Does anybody pop out to you? Do you have the same Joe Burrow feeling as you do about Chase Young?
I don't, and it could bite me here. I'm going to steer clear. I'm going to bet against the chalk here. And man, I let the Clyde Edwards-Helaire excitement post draft. I kind of poo-pooed it. Like, oh, okay, yeah. I mean, how much opportunity is he really going to get? And that was to my detriment because early prices on Clyde were like in the teens.
Yeah. You can't reasonably know that.
No, there's no way. No, there's no way. But it speaks to this category overall, which is that if Joe Burrow is going to have plenty of opportunity, but I have a huge red flag, which is that his offensive line is absolute trash. It is probably a clear, in my opinion at least, it's a clear bottom 5 offensive line, which means you're in this system where you're going to be asked to let plays develop downfield. and you're going to be running for your life, and it's your first year in the league, and you don't have a ton of check down, solid check down options. I worry about, and I think Joe Burrow is a little small for the NFL at this time. I think he needs to get a little bigger. So I worry about Burrow making 16 starts, to be honest with you. That's kind of cooled me off on any kind of Cincinnati. Take. I'm cool on any Cincinnati bullishness, really. Just because, if something happens to Burrow and he misses a few starts, you got Ryan Finley coming in. It could get real ugly in Cincinnati this year until they upgrade that offensive line. And by the way, you're in a division with the Myles Garrett, who we mentioned, TJ Watt, who we mentioned, the blitz happy Ravens, who we mentioned. Like it's not a great soft landing for poor Joe Burrow this year. So I'm willing to bet against him. Okay. I think Tua is also not a price I'm interested in taking at all, just because of the injury question marks, because of the lack of a full preseason here.
He might not start. It might be Ryan Fitzpatrick. I mean,
Fitzpatrick could reasonably start half of or more of this season, which means that if you're looking past those two quarterbacks, the rest of the board all comes down to opportunity. Who is going to get the opportunity? It's going to be something weird like a holdout, or like an opt out, like what happened with Damian Williams and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Like you're going to need some luck. Whereas a lot of what we've talked about to this point has been kind of a more effective, for lack of a better word, it was a handicap, right? I think betting offensive rookie of the year is a gamble, because you're going to have to bet on a guy that happens to get opportunity because the guy ahead of him on the depth chart gets hurt, in the case of Henry Ruggs, for instance, is a good example. Like he's 14-1 because he's now the number one wide receiving option on that team. Out of the blue here, and it's going to take something like that for these guys to have opportunity to compile stats. The guy I circled out of this mix was J.K. Dobbins at 20-1. I personally, Mark Ingram faded big time down the stretch last year. He's getting up there in age. The running back position is maybe as important to the Ravens as any other team, just because of how dynamic their rushing attack is. Just what they can do from a running attack standpoint is so awesome. And he fits their system perfectly. He's got, massive speed. He was a steal where they got him in the draft. I thought, I'm not a running back draft truther. I don't mind taking a second round running back at all.
It's not that big of an expense. I don't understand why people are so hot and bothered about it.
I really don't get it either. I'd rather have a talented player who can plug and play immediately if I'm on the cusp of.
You got him for cost control for 4 years. If he's a great player, it's a tremendous investment.
Great, exactly. Pick a guy off the scrap heap, make a trade for you trade a 5th round pick for a Matt Breida. Like that's a fine way to go about your running back position. Taking a J.K. Dobbins second round is fine, and I just like him as a player. Like he's just a very solid player. I don't, if you watch any college football, you don't need to know that OSU produces pro football players. So J.K. Dobbins absolutely in the mix at 20-1 for me. I like him better than like Cam Akers or DeAndre Swift, who I could see really having a tough time kind of wrestling control of the RB1, so to speak. Similarly, Henry Ruggs is very, very raw. CeeDee Lamb, awesome offense. That offense is going to be so freaking good.
But how is he going to get 100?
But exactly. Target? Right. Yeah. He's clearly the third option. Like, Gallup has amazing chemistry with Dak, and Amari Cooper might be the best wide receiver in the NFC. CeeDee Lamb clearly the number 3 on that team for right now. They have an embarrassment of riches. It's tough to see how much opportunity he's going to get without an injury. Similarly, Jerry Jeudy, I'm not a Drew Lock guy. I'm not a Denver Broncos guy this season. I have huge questions about their offensive line and what Jerry Jeudy's role is going to be, especially because, Cortland Sutton, I think, is the true wide receiver 1 in that offense. So Jerry Jeudy's going to be picking up scraps a little. So it's, I can rule out a lot of these wide receivers who are kind of in the mix here and just kind of focus on J.K. Dobbins and maybe look down the board a little bit for a long shot.
Yeah, I agree. I like Dobbins a lot. And John Harbaugh came out this week and said that he said Dobbins is going to have a big part of that. And some of this is coach talk in the preseason, and we haven't seen Dobbins run, but they're going to run a ton. And I would venture a guess, Drew, that if the Ravens are playing well, and win a lot of games early. Yeah. That in the middle of the season, in order to, because remember, Mark Ingram went down against the Titans and that offense stopped.
Yep.
You almost wonder if they might preserve Mark Ingram by utilizing J.K. Dobbins more throughout the year. Maybe some Justice Hill too, but they invested highly in Dobbins. Some of the longer shots I like, and I agree with you. I don't the Broncos thing. I like the Broncos. I love the talent. Locke has started 5 games.
Yeah.
And all these guys are young.
Against some bad defenses too.
Yeah. Like I mean, it's just a little high for me. I think I actually wouldn't mind the 3 longer shots. I don't mind. One, Leviska Chanult at 33-1. I love Leviska Chanult as a player coming out of Colorado. I thought he could have been a first-round pick. I think he's not like an elite route runner per se, or like a super heady wide receiver. Like, he's just a beast. And if they're smart, and Jay Gruden is smart, if he gets the ball in his hands, and like I know Evan Silva mentioned this the other day, it's not even like that crazy. They could use him as like the goal line back there because they don't have anybody with Fournette on. So at that price, I would be interested in like a small investment. Michael Pittman, bit of a longer shot, but 50-1. Frank Reich said he thinks he's the best wide receiver in the draft. You got to compete with T.Y. Hilton and Paris Campbell for targets, but he could be
T.Y. Hilton's probably going to get injured at some point, though. So
yeah, and maybe he's just the red zone guy, right?
Yeah, sure.
And then A.J. Dillon at 50-1. I like A.J. Dillon as a player at Boston College. I don't like where the Packers took him because I think he's a non-pass catching running back in the second round, and I thought it was a poor investment. But if Aaron Jones gets hurt and they just lean on A.J. Dillon and he has 1,200 rushing yards, we saw where Josh Jacobs easily could have beaten Kyler Murray last year for Rookie of the Year if he'd been healthy the whole season. So I think those are the 3 longer shots I don't mind taking a look at.
Yeah. I don't disagree with any of those calls. The only one I'm going to add to your list here.
Yeah.
Are we sure Wentz is going to start 16 games?
Woo!
I mean,
by the way, Debo is a huge Eagles fan. So this is delightful. I didn't tell him to say this, Debo, but it was delightful that he got that in there.
I mean, it's
I don't hate it. He's hurt right now.
I know he's hurt. He's hurt right now. The shot that he took in the playoffs last year was brutal.
Are we he's going to start one game? What if Jalen Hurts is just this Eagles starter from Jump Street and he's 80-1?
Yeah,
for Rookie of the Year.
They got a good team. They're a good team. Yeah. Like, you know what? Like, and I gotta always tip my hat to our friend Preston Johnson, sports cheater, for this. Years ago, Dak Prescott's rookie year. I think it was between preseason games, week 2 and 3. He tweets out, "Man, why is Dak Prescott 500-1 for Rookie of the Year? Like, this is crazy." Like, Tony Romo, he's like one shot away from being done for the season, and the rest of the Cowboys are awesome. Like, they're going to be good even with Dak Prescott. So why is he 500-1? And then like he bet it. He got 500-1. He moved the market big time. It came into like 100-1. By the time I saw it, I got a little at like 100-1-ish. And like, no joke, 3 days later, their preseason game number 3, Tony Romo got a shot in the back against the Seahawks, I think. Didn't play a single snap that whole season. And Prescott was freaking awesing. And that was history.
The only challenger to Prescott for the offensive rookie of the year was Zeke.
Yes, that's right.
No, Zeke. I guess right. It was Zeke, right? They drafted him.
I think they split it. I think they split the.
No, Dak definitely won, but there was a debate about it.
Okay,
it was definitely the same draft. Yeah,
they were absolutely the same draft. Absolutely they were.
Yeah.
But fact, that was wild. So
on the other side of that, in 2016, I was charged with ranking the backup quarterback situations in the NFL from best to worst.
Okay.
And I ranked the Cowboys dead last because my argument wasn't even right, but it wasn't even like I don't like Dak. Because Dak beat the snot out of NC State in the bowl game in the Belk Bowl like a few months before. I love Dak, but they had Kellen Moore ahead of him, and then Kellen Moore breaks his leg. It's like, well, I mean, like it was like Kellen Moore was taking snaps ahead of Dak Prescott. Dak was going to be third string all season long, and then he comes out and does that. So yeah, good call on Preston. By the way, could Preston? I don't think he's listening, but could he be a little less vague in tweeting out the plays he likes in the NBA? Could he just be like, I know I said that the British do a good job of it, but he's like, I think that 7-5-2 could be a high scoring affair. Or like
I realistically, with great power comes great responsibility, you know, and there's a lot of people that are on his timeline just looking for degenerate action. And he's probably a little conscientious of that, I would guess.
That's probably, and if you tweet out, like I know Dan Lifshatz tweeted out. He tweeted out, like somebody was like, you picked against the Celtics, or like you picked against the Celtics and the Raptors. That's what you get, you clown, you hater. How dare you do that? And he's like, I'm not trying to like reverse jinx or jinx anybody. I'm rooting for the Celtics, but I think the Raptors were the play. And frankly, and then we're talking about the game too. They
definitely were the play. They were the play. Yeah, Marcus Smart doesn't go nuclear for 2 minutes, then the Raptors win game 2 and they're back in the series. So it was a good play. Fair play.
Debo, before we get out of here, any thoughts on Jalen Hurts at 81 and or Drew and I talking NBA? Debo's not here. Okay. Debo has disappeared. I guess he's posting the other podcast. That's good. I guess he didn't hear that. Or he's on mute. On another chat, ping me when I need to end things. He chatted me a second ago. Okay, never mind. That's how we operate around here.
Hey, I mean, realistically, like I like Carson Wentz. He's, like I hope for him to have a fully healthy season. But I like Jalen Hurts too. And the fact that they made a move to take him in the second round, like that tells you something. Right, like we're not the only ones that are concerned about Carson Wentz's well-being here.
No. I think, and it's a great point on Dak. Like, if he gets hurt, let's say he gets hurt 4 games in, Carson Wentz gets hurt.
Yeah, are the Eagles still in the mix for the NFC East? Absolutely,
of course. Absolutely. And they beat the Cowboys. They get the number 1 seed, and it's on Jalen Hurts' back. I mean, that guy's going to get buzz.
Yeah.
For offensive rookie of the year. So splash a little on 80-1. Jalen Hurts and just bank on the Carson Wentz injury potentially happening. Now I'm just testing to see whether Debo's back or not.
I still contest that Lamar Jackson should have won Rookie of the Year 2 years ago. They pull Flacco and put in, Lamar Jackson. The Ravens are out of the mix.
Yeah,
they are not competing for the playoffs. They put in.
Did you bet on Lamar Jackson before the season?
I did have him that year, because I thought I thought there was a chance, similar kind of situation. I thought there was a chance Flacco was going to get hurt. They put in Lamar Jackson. He went 7-1 down the stretch and freaking hauled the Ravens into the playoffs by his damn self. And they
Saquon won it.
Yeah.
I think Baker could have beaten out Saquon.
Baker was, I know, Baker or Lamar would have been a better choice, I think, than Sack Barkley in terms of impact on, team's performance over the course of the season.
So we got 2016, 2017, and then who won? Kyler won it last year. Was there a rookie who stepped in and took over? Drew Lock? Like, he wasn't going to win.
Yeah.
But my point being is that, like, the last 3 years, there's been a guy who's like the Broncos could have won. The Broncos have won a couple more games before Flacco gets hurt, and 2 of those teams involve Flacco, which is hilarious. But
why he got it? Why was he the same? That honestly, part of my concern about the Broncos and their chances this season, like if your head coach is looking at your roster last year and is like, Flacco is our guy, like here we go, right? Like
I like how you whispered that. You're like,
I don't love that. I don't love it. I don't love it. I worry about what's going on there from the top down.
But I'm just thinking, like, the last 3 years, there's at least been one quarterback who was drafted in the first 2 rounds that appeared because of injury or appeared because of like something like popped in and played a lot. Am I missing a year? I guess I'm missing 2018.
Man. We have
anyway. The point being is Jalen Hurts is the play this year. If Wentz gets hurt, you're sitting on an 80-1 ticket. That's probably why he's 80-1 because of Dak Prescott.
Right. I mean, compare that to Tua at 8-1. Tua needs. Tua may come in at some point, but I don't know. Dolphins really, if Tua comes in, that means the Dolphins season is over. And it's going to be too little too late. Whereas Hurts, could come in to spell Wentz. And I think you're still talking about, you're still as an Eagles fan, you're still talking yourself into NFC East title.
I love it. All right. Drew Dinsick, at Whale Capper, at Whale_Capper on Twitter. Listen to Deep Dive Podcast. Thanks as always, buddy. Good talk. Now we got, this may be the most productive actual betting show so far of the gambling week in terms of actionable items. So great stuff by you, man. Talk to you soon, pal.
Always a pleasure. Appreciate you having me on, and best luck this season.